I'll never forget that night. The sky was lit with fire, and the deafening sound of explosions shook my very soul. We were surrounded, and every step could be our last. I looked at my comrades, fear etched on their faces, and asked myself, would any of us make it out alive? Thousands of miles away, my mother was on her knees, crying and praying for me, unaware if she would ever see me again. And then something unbelievable happened. Something that changed my life forever. How could a mother's prayers reach across the world to protect me in a moment of pure terror? You're about to find out. Stay with me until the end. You won't believe what happened next.
I was born in a small town in Georgia, where the air smelled of pine and the horizon seemed endless. My childhood was simple, filled with the sounds of laughter, the creak of old wooden floors, and the smell of Mom's homemade bread baking in the oven. My father had passed away before I could even remember his face clearly, leaving Mom as the sole keeper of our home and our hearts. Mary Thompson, my mother, was a woman of quiet strength, with eyes that carried storms and serenity at the same time. She worked as a nurse's assistant in the local clinic and somehow always found the time to pray for her patients, for her neighbors, and most fervently for me. I never truly understood the power of her prayers as a child. I saw her kneeling at night, whispering names and stories, her lips trembling, eyes closed tight. I would sometimes peek through the doorway, half embarrassed, half curious, and ask her why she always prayed so hard. She would smile softly, without opening her eyes, and whisper, because every soul needs someone who believes in them, David. And I believe in you. Growing up without a father left a void that I tried to fill with adventure and reckless courage. I was the boy who climbed the tallest trees, raced through the streets on my old bicycle, and got into trouble at school for challenging authority. Yet, no matter how far I pushed the limits, I always returned to my mother's embrace, to her voice that carried both comfort and discipline. By the time I was 15, the idea of serving my country had taken root in me. I had watched documentaries, read every story I could find about soldiers, and I felt a pull, almost magnetic, toward the life of a soldier. It wasn't about glory. It wasn't about escaping home. It was about proving something to myself, to my mother, and in some invisible way, to the father I never knew. The night I told her I wanted to enlist was one I'll never forget. We were sitting in the living room, the old lamp casting a warm glow over her tired features. I had rehearsed my words countless times, but when the moment came, they tumbled out in a rush. Mom, I've decided. I'm going to join the Army. Her hands froze in her lap. I could see her heart racing behind her calm exterior. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought I had broken her. Then she took a deep breath, reached for my hand, and said, I knew this day would come. I'm scared, David, but I am also proud. Just promise me you'll carry faith in your heart, always. That night, she prayed with a fervor I had never witnessed before. I didn't fully understand it then, but I felt it as a force surrounding me, as if invisible hands were holding me safe in the dark. Basic training was nothing like I imagined. The first day, the drill sergeant's voice thundered in the barracks, shaking me to my core. Every muscle ached, every nerve screamed for reprieve, and yet the thought of my mother's prayers kept me moving. I pushed through exhaustion, humiliation, and fear, learning the brutal rhythm of military life. Wake, train, fight fatigue, repeat. I forged bonds with my fellow recruits that were stronger than anything I had ever known. Mark, a kid from Ohio with a laugh that could cut through the tension of any day. Luis, who had joined the Army to honor his grandfather, a World War II veteran. And Sarah, the only female recruit in our unit, who had nerves of steel and a determination that matched my own. We became a family in the harshest sense, learning to trust each other with our lives, knowing that a single mistake could cost everything. Months passed, and the training intensified. We learned to handle weapons, navigate terrain, and survive in hostile environments. We were molded into soldiers, but every drill, every obstacle, reminded me of the fragility of life. I carry my mother's words in my heart like a talisman. "You are never alone, David." Deployment orders came suddenly. We were assigned to a conflict zone that I had only seen on the news. Flying into the area was surreal. The landscape below was a mixture of desert, mountains, and villages that looked peaceful from the sky, yet we knew danger lurked everywhere. I stared out the plane window, thinking of my mother kneeling in our small living room, whispering prayers I could not hear. That thought steadied me in a way nothing else could. Our mission was to patrol a strategic valley and secure intelligence about enemy movements. It seems simple in theory, but war is never simple. The closer we got to our destination, the heavier the air became with tension. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, set our nerves on edge. On the first night in the field, I wrote a letter to my mother. I told her I loved her, that I was scared, and that I would carry her prayers with me. I folded the paper carefully, knowing I might not have the chance to send it for weeks, maybe months. It was a small act of connection, a lifeline between us across thousands of miles. Days turned into weeks. Each mission brought new dangers, landmines, sniper fire, ambushes, but also small moments of humanity. I remember sharing canned meals with locals, teaching children to write their names in English, and laughing with my squad over stories from home. Even in the chaos of war, life found its way to touch us. And yet, a shadow loomed over every step we took. I could feel it in the silence of the night, in the sudden stops during patrols, in a way my heart pounded when we crossed open terrain. My mother's prayers were my anchor, the thought of her voice carrying across oceans, keeping me grounded when fear threatened to swallow me. Then came the night that would change everything. We were ordered to advance into a narrow valley that had been flagged as high risk. Reports indicated enemy activity, but the specifics were unclear. My stomach twisted as we moved forward, every sense alert. I glanced at my squad. Mark tightened his grip on his rifle. Luis whispered a silent prayer, and Sarah's eyes were sharp, scanning for danger. We were a unit, a fragile thread of human courage holding against an unseen storm. As we entered the valley, the wind died down unnaturally, and an eerie silence enveloped us. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I felt an almost physical weight pressing against my chest. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just nerves, but deep down I knew something was wrong. And then, without warning, a single gunshot cracked through the night. The night was darker than anything I had ever known. The stars above seemed to vanish, swallowed by smoke and the fire from the first skirmishes. Our unit had been pinned in the valley for hours, and the enemy's presence was overwhelming. Every shadow could conceal a sniper. Every rustle of leaves could signal an ambush. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, each beat a reminder that survival was uncertain. I could hear Mark yelling from the left flank, giving commands, tried to keep our small group coordinated, but even his voice was swallowed by the chaos. Luis was crouched beside me, whispering prayers under his breath, his eyes wide with fear. Sarah was moving with calculated precision, returning fire, her face a mask of focus and determination. I felt an almost unbearable weight on my chest, the kind that only comes when you realize that life and death are so close they could touch each other. Through the haze of gunfire and smoke, I thought of my mother, Mary Thompson, thousands of miles away, kneeling in our small living room, her hands trembling as she prayed for me. I imagined her tears falling on the carpet, her lips moving in fervent whispers, calling upon a power I could not see but somehow felt. That thought gave me strength, a lifeline stronger than any weapon in my hands. The enemy was strategic, their attack well coordinated. They had surrounded us in a deadly pattern, leaving us vulnerable at every turn. Explosions shattered the ground around us, sending dirt and rock into the air. I pressed my back against a crumbling wall, my rifle shaking in my hands. Every shot I fired felt both necessary and terrifying. I had never felt the weight of responsibility so heavily before. Every friend in my unit could be gone in a single instant, and I had to stay alive, not just for myself, but for them, for my mother, for the promise of returning home. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed distorted. The valley had become a labyrinth of smoke, fire, and confusion. I lost sight of Mark and Louise for a moment, and panic surged in my chest. I called out their names, my voice raw, trembling. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah signaling me to move behind a cluster of rocks. Her hand gestures were urgent, desperate but precise. Following her, I crawled over the jagged ground, my uniform soaked with sweat and grime. Suddenly, a flash of movement, too quick to be human, passed near me. My heart leapt and instinct took over. I fired, the crack of my rifle echoing across the valley. Silence followed, then a faint groan. My hands shook as I realized I had survived another near encounter. Survival felt almost surreal, like I was witnessing a world that didn't belong to the living. Amid the chaos, I thought again of my mother. The thought of her praying, of believing in me, filled me with an almost mystical courage. Each step I took, each shot I fired felt guided. I whispered her name under my breath, almost as a mantra, and felt a strange calm amidst the storm. I wasn't alone. I couldn't be. Minutes, or what felt like hours, later, a mortar exploded nearby, throwing me to the ground. Dust filled my lungs, choking me, and my ears rang. For a terrifying moment, I couldn't see, couldn't move. Panic clawed at me, threatening to consume every thought. But then I felt a hand on my shoulder, Sarah's, and she pulled me up. "We need to keep moving," she shouted. Her voice was steady, though I could see the fear behind her eyes. We scrambled through the valley, each step a battle against fear and exhaustion. Louise fell behind for a moment, shouting something I couldn't hear. I ran back, grabbed his arm, and pulled him to safety. "We survived together," I said, though my voice was barely audible over the chaos. The enemy had us cornered in a narrow pass, with only a few meters between life and death. It was there that I understood the true meaning of desperation. Each second was a test of faith, courage, and sheer willpower. I could feel the presence of something beyond human intervention, a force that seemed to guide my hand, steady my aim, and push me forward when every instinct screamed to flee. In that moment, I remembered something my mother had once told me. "David, when you feel hopeless, close your eyes, and I will be there in prayer. You are stronger than you know, and love is a shield no enemy can destroy." I closed my eyes for just a second, feeling the words wrap around me like a protective armor. When I opened them again, I fired with precision, covering our retreat as my squad moved to safer ground. We had lost men already. The screams of those who had fallen haunted me, echoing through the valley. Yet, each step forward was a defiance of the fear that threatened to paralyze us. I felt the heavy weight of survival, the knowledge that my life depended on my actions and that the lives of those around me did too. Then, as if the universe itself answered our silent pleas, a moment of opportunity appeared. The enemy had overextended, leaving a narrow corridor open through which we could escape. Mark signaled quickly, and we moved in perfect unison, adrenaline and fear merging into a single driving force. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat was a fragile thread holding our lives together. As we fled through the corridor, I glanced back at the valley. Smoke rising, shadows shifting, chaos still raging. I whispered a silent thank you to my mother, knowing that her prayers had traveled across continents to protect us. I couldn't explain it, but something had held us together, some invisible shield that had given us a chance to survive. By dawn, we reached a small ridge overlooking a safer path. The sky was a mixture of red and gold, the first light of day breaking through the night of terror. We were battered, exhausted, and grieving, but we were alive. And in that survival, I felt a profound connection to my mother, to the faith that had kept me going, and to the inexplicable moments that define life itself. We gathered the remaining members of our unit, tending to wounds, sharing whispered prayers, and silently acknowledging the lives we had lost. Each one of us carried a mixture of grief and relief, a complex tapestry of emotions that only those who have faced death together can understand. In the quiet moments that followed, I found a small patch of land and sat, holding my head in my hands. I could almost feel my mother's presence, as if she were there beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her words a balm to my frayed nerves. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer of my own. Thanks, relief, hope. It was then I realized the truth. We are never truly alone. Even in the darkest moments, when surrounded by chaos and death, the bonds of love, faith, and courage can protect us in ways that logic cannot explain. My mother's prayers had not prevented the danger, but they had given me the strength to endure it, to act with clarity and courage when survival hung by a thread. That day changed me forever. I understood the weight of life and death, the invisible threads that connect us to those we love, and the power of faith when all else seems lost. I vowed to carry that lesson with me, to honor those who had fallen, and to never underestimate the unseen forces that guide us through the impossible. Even now, I can close my eyes and remember the valley, the smoke, the fire, the fear, and the miraculous sense of protection that carried us through. I survived, not just because of training or luck, but because of love, faith, and a mother who refused to stop believing. The ridge where we found refuge gave us only a temporary sense of safety. The enemy was relentless, and by sunrise, we knew they would come again. Our unit was battered, half our numbers lost, and the survivors were physically and emotionally drained. My clothes were torn, my body bruised, and yet the heaviest weight I carried was the memory of those who hadn't made it through the night. Mark sat nearby, his usually bright eyes dimmed with exhaustion. Luis was muttering prayers, his lips trembling as though he feared stopping might cost us our lives. Sarah was busy tending to a wounded soldier, her hands steady despite the shaking ground that seemed to echo with distant artillery fire. As I sat on the cold ground, staring at the valley below, I thought again of my mother. Thousands of miles away, she would be waking up, perhaps boiling water for tea, perhaps whispering my name. Maybe she already knew, somehow, that I was on the brink of life and death. I could picture her hands, weathered yet strong, folded tightly as she prayed. That image steadied me, reminding me that even here, in the middle of hell, I was not alone. By midday, the enemy advanced again. They knew we were weakened, and they came with full force. The air vibrated with the sound of machine guns and mortars. Explosions shook the ridge, sending dirt and stone raining down on us. My heart pounded as we returned fire, each shot more desperate than the last. The ridge that had seemed like a sanctuary became a death trap, and it felt as though time itself was running out. Luis shouted, "They're coming from both sides," and the panic in his voice mirrored my own fear. Mark tried to rally us, screaming commands through the chaos, but even his words were drowned out by the roar of battle. Sarah pulled me back just as a bullet grazed the stone where my head had been seconds before. It was hopeless, or at least it felt that way. Surrounded again, cut off from reinforcements, with supplies dwindling and our strength nearly gone. I felt despair rising in my chest, threatening to choke me. For a moment, I thought of surrender, of laying down my weapon and letting fate decide. But then, just as despair threatened to consume me, something extraordinary happened. The sky, which had been heavy with smoke, seemed to shift. A sudden gust of wind tore through the valley, carrying with it a strange stillness, as though the earth itself paused. The enemy, advancing with confidence, hesitated. For just a heartbeat, they seemed unsure, their movements faltering. And in that brief hesitation, I felt something greater than myself take hold. I remember my mother's words. "When you feel hopeless, close your eyes, and I will be there in prayer." So I closed my eyes, even as bullets flew around me, and I whispered, "God, if you hear me, if you hear her, let us live." When I opened my eyes, the world seemed sharper, clearer. My fear hadn't disappeared, but it no longer ruled me. I shouted to my squad, louder than I thought possible. "We move now. Together." Something in my voice carried weight, authority, almost as though it wasn't just me speaking. We surged forward with renewed strength, using the enemy's hesitation to push through their lines. Sarah fired with deadly precision, covering our advance. Mark and Luis moved like shadows, quick and unyielding. I felt energy coursing through me, guiding me, shielding me. Each step forward felt like defiance against the impossible. As we fought, a sudden explosion erupted behind the enemy lines. For a moment, they scattered, confused, disoriented. Later, we would learn that another Allied unit had launched an unexpected strike, but in that moment, it felt like divine intervention. It was as if the heavens themselves had answered my mother's prayers, striking at the perfect moment to give us a chance. Seizing the opportunity, we pushed harder, breaking through the enemy's encirclement. The battle raged on, brutal and unrelenting, but somehow we found openings where there should have been none. I moved as though guided by an unseen hand, dodging bullets I should never have survived, firing shots that found their marks with uncanny accuracy. Hours later, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the battlefield grew quiet. Smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the metallic scent of blood and gunpowder. We were alive. Against all odds, against logic and reason, we had survived. But survival came at a cost. Mark had taken a bullet to the leg, his face pale but determined. Luis had lost his weapon, but still clung to his faith, whispering thanks with every breath. Sarah bore wounds of her own, yet she moved with unbroken resolve, tending to the others before herself. And me? I carried not just the weight of the battle, but the unshakable certainty that something greater had carried us through. That night, as we huddled together, sharing what little food and water we had left, I felt compelled to speak. My voice was hoarse, cracked from shouting and smoke, but I spoke from the deepest part of me. "I don't know how we made it out," I said, looking at each of them, "but I know it wasn't just us. My mother's been praying for me every day, every night. And today, I swear I felt it. I swear those prayers reached us here. Maybe that's what gave us the strength. Maybe that's what saved us." Silence followed my words. Then Luis, his eyes wet with tears, nodded. "Faith moves mountains," he whispered. Sarah gave me a small, tired smile. Even Mark, who rarely spoke of faith, muttered, "Maybe your mom saved all of us." In that moment, I realized the truth. The power of love and faith doesn't just protect one person. It spreads as shields, it lifts entire groups. My mother's prayers hadn't just been for me. Somehow, they'd been for all of us. When we were finally evacuated days later, the valley lay behind us like a nightmare fading into memory. Yet, etched into my soul was the knowledge that survival wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was faith, love, and the unseen threads that connect us to those who refuse to stop believing. Months later, when I returned home, I saw my mother waiting for me at the airport. Her hair was grayer, her face lined with worry, but her eyes, those eyes of strength and storms, were filled with tears of relief. I ran to her, embracing her with all the strength I had left. She whispered in my ear, "I never stopped praying, David. Not for 1 second." I pulled back, looking into her eyes, and said, "Mom, I felt it. I swear to you, I felt your prayers. They saved me. They saved us all." She smiled through her tears, cupping my face in her hands. "Faith, my son. Faith is the greatest weapon we will ever have." That night, sitting at our old wooden table, I told her everything. Every detail of the valley, every moment I had felt despair, and every miraculous turn that had carried us through. She listened, her hands clasped tightly, nodding as though she had known all along. And when I finished, she said something I will never forget. "David, prayer doesn't always stop the storm, but it can carry you through it. And sometimes, when the storm is fiercest, that's when God shows his greatest power." Those words remain with me to this day. I carry them in every step, in every challenge, in every moment I face darkness. I learned that love and faith are shields no weapon can pierce, no enemy can destroy. So if you've listened this far, remember this. Never underestimate the power of faith. Never doubt the strength of love. And never forget that even in the darkest valley, you are not alone. I'm here because my mother prayed. I'm alive because of love that reached across oceans and battlefields. And if this story touched you, let it remind you that miracles happen, even in the darkest of nights. And before you go, listen to me. Most of you are watching this, moved by this story, but you still haven't subscribed to this channel. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think of your own mother, your own family, your own faith, then do it now. Subscribe, share this story, and let's keep alive the power of stories that remind us of hope, courage, and love. Because sometimes all it takes is one prayer to change everything.